When you do an analysis of China and its energy strategy, and they are strategic about it, don't kid yourself, they are heavily reliant on coal. They are barely reliant at all on natural gas. And even the gas they import comes from mostly friendly countries. Turkmenistan is not going to go to war with China. But their biggest weakness is oil. Okay. What do you want to do? So one of the things China did was they enabled the shale revolution. That's an odd thing to say. Well, the way they enabled the shale revolution was they absorbed all the NGLs the U.S. could send them. They built the engines. They built the factories. They built the petrochemical facilities to take LPG and ethane on huge scales. Why? Why not? It's cheap. And also it enables more crude production. And so if you're short crude, let's enable the shale revolution. They're very interested in the world being flooded with crude oil and the price of oil going down. Okay, that's interesting. What's the other very interesting thing about China when you do a next level deeper? Let's look at their grid. Well, their grid is entirely domestic with a tiny little wedge of natural gas dependency. But again, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Russia aren't going to war with China. And yes, they participate in LNG, but it's pretty small and they swing trade and they do that just for profit. So it's coal, hydro, wind, solar, nuclear, all in the border, all under their control. Their grid is self-sufficient. Okay, suddenly the world is moving towards an electrify everything movement. Is that a coincidence? China would like that because they dominate all the technologies needed to do the electrify everything movement.
Right.
Wind and solar and batteries, electric vehicles. So their weakness is crude oil. Let's convince the rest of the world that crude oil is bad. While they buy it up, hand over fist, store it to the tune of 1.5 billion barrels, yada, yada, yada. I mean, China is playing a sophisticated game of chess when it comes to energy.
Yeah, that was kind of, I mean, the propaganda of wind, of solar, the propaganda of solar coming out of China was that, you know, they were going to lead the world in solar development and wind development as well. And you know, that was something you pointed out last year, which was that, you know, ahead of the market sort of realizing it was that, you know, China was actually cutting its investment in solar while it was saying, you know, we're going to do that. Yeah.
And so here's another mental model of ours, which is a very simple way to look at grids. And again, grid experts will object to some minor nuance, but for the rest of us, let's indulge in a bit of generalization. An operator of a grid cares about meeting supply and demand exactly. And what's really valuable to a grid operator is what's known as dispatchable electricity. It can come on and go off relatively quickly, smoothly, on command, doesn't break things when it does it. And you know, in the overlap of the Venn diagram of fuels capable of providing baseload power, steady 24/7 type power, not intermittent like wind and solar, and dispatchable natural gas and hydro are the two winners. Coal and nuclear, they're kind of like big battleships and they don't like to be turned on a dime. And so they're really great for baseload, a great foundation for your grid. But for that part of your grid that has to flex into and out of nights and days and all that kind of stuff, you know, your dispatchable part of your grid really matters. And China's grid is dominated by coal. Like 55% of electricity comes from coal. It has huge hydropower. It's like 5 times bigger than the US. So that is a great source. You know, impoundment hydropower, not run of the river. If you have a big dam, the water behind that dam is a great battery. You can spool up and spool down and match supply and demand while your coal plants just keep running all day, dirt cheap, 24/7. Okay. So I said 2 things, hydro and natural gas. Those are the dispatchable subsets of baseload power. The more you put wind and solar on a grid, that's intermittent. The sun shines, it doesn't. It rains for a week. The wind blows hard. The wind goes dead in the dead of winter just when you need it. All these problems that are well known, that are, you know, popular critiques of the green energy transition. As a general rule, as a mental model, when intermittency swamps dispatchability, things begin to break. It's a very simple heuristic. So all we do then with that mental model, well, that's pretty predictive. It explains things and it explains California, and it explains, you know, Germany. Okay, let's look at China. So you just go to the Statistical Review of World Energy and you plot the generation of electricity from wind and solar combined against the generation of electricity from natural gas and hydro combined. And when they cross, things are going to break. And we flagged that last year in a presentation. We used it as bait for a promotion called Cocktail Party Trivia, Winning the Renewables Debate with Friends and Family. We laid out that mental model. We had one of the slides was a grid of fuel source measured against criteria: baseload, yes, no; dispatchable, yes, no; intermittent, yes, no; carbon free, yes, no. All those attributes that you might care about. And we pointed out that dilemma. If you're going to match intermittency, you need dispatchability. And the two sources of dispatchability that matter are natural gas and hydro. And then even this mental model goes one further. Well, what about batteries? Batteries is always the the hand in the back of the room. Batteries are in fact dispatchable. They're instantly dispatchable. They're not baseload.
Right.
They need to be recharged. And so the amount of batteries you would need to properly back up a grid, and we showed this in the China presentation. Right now, all of the batteries installed in China, and by the way, China accounts for half of all of the BESS systems installed in the world.
Right.
Is enough to back up their grid for 30 seconds. You could check my numbers.
30 seconds. Wow.
But more realistically, the installed capacity of wind and solar could charge those batteries from empty in about 18 minutes. So the amount of batteries you would need, that's just another way to look at it, like the amount of batteries you would need to install that mostly do nothing. Talk about like a poor asset utilization, right? Is unfathomable to people. Maybe they could do it. A much better solution, and so take us one step further to show you how our lateral thinking approach works. Okay, what is the one thing that would turn this all on its head? Well, you make coal more dispatchable. Okay, let's do some digging. Is there a technology that would make coal more dispatchable? And there is, a Brayton cycle and supercritical CO2 and all this experimental stuff that we've heard about over the years. And suddenly you do some digging, and yeah, China's playing with that. Okay, let's put that on our internal radar we will be wrong with, stated more correctly, that mental model about dispatchability and intermittency will need to be discarded if China cracks making coal more dispatchable in an economic way. Great. Not only is our mental model currently working, we know when it'll be wrong, and we'll discard it then, which is wonderful. So if China cracks dispatchability for coal, wind and solar make all the sense in the world for China. We'd be the first to say it. Doesn't mean it makes sense for America. Doesn't mean it makes sense for Canada that gets no sun. But for China, sure, especially considering that they're really worried about energy independence and resiliency. Correctly,